Hi y'all, my name's JT, and after a long time and a lot of thinking, I've decided to share some of my knowledge and experiences with what people call Bigfoot, Sasquatch, lots of different names. A little bit about me. I served in the Marines, and I am a part of law enforcement now. It's taken me a while to feel comfortable and try to share some of my experiences, because I don't want to be labeled as crazy or to damage my reputation or affect my family in any way. But a big part of me has finally felt that whether you believe me or anyone believes what I say, I really, truly, honestly believe that knowledge is power. And I love the outdoors, and I would tell anyone and everyone, if you can go out and enjoy nature, do it. Be safe and enjoy it, because it's amazing. There's places all over our great country in the US, all over the world, where the beauty of nature, the wildlife, and there's just, you can't replace it. And seeing it on a TV screen or just hearing about it can never actually explain how much joy and how beautiful things are out there. So I always want to encourage people to go out and see nature and enjoy Earth and our wildlife. But again, knowledge is power, and I firmly believe anything you do, you should always go out or do it with as much knowledge as you can, so you can be safe. And going outdoors, camping, hiking, you need to have good knowledge, because it is the wild, and sometimes things can happen, and wildlife can be beautiful and amazing, but sometimes can be a little dangerous as well. So I want to share, I've had some experiences, and for a long time I did not believe in Bigfoot, Sasquatch. I've hunted and camped all my life and heard plenty of stories around a campfire from older people in my community. I'm from the South, but now I live in the northwest of the US, and I did not have any experiences or sightings until I moved to the northwest of the US. When I lived in the South, I heard plenty of stories, legends from Native Americans as well, and I kind of brushed it off as, you know, myth, maybe misidentification. And I'm sure some of the stories and things that people have shared with me are myth or just legends. Native Americans have a rich history and a wonderful mythology as well, but I've come to realize that a lot of the Native Americans that I've spoken with and have got to know, and that have took me out and showed me different ways to track, to hunt, and that have opened their doors to me, and I can call friend, and have shared knowledge about Bigfoot and Sasquatch with me. I firmly believe what they've shared, even if it wasn't their personal experience. Some of them had been, the stories they told me had been passed down from generation to generation, and I believe many of them were true events. Something did happen. So I wanted to finally share some of my experiences I've had. My job is a big part of being out in the country and out in the woods, where people don't always go or very rarely go. And then even when I'm not working out in that, I love being outdoors. I like to hunt. I love to camp, hike. So I've had a lot of different experiences and knowledge shared with me, but I've always been afraid to kind of get my knowledge and speak, because I don't, like I said in the beginning here, I don't want to affect my livelihood or my reputation, or have my family have any issues. But I'd rather share my knowledge, and it might help people, or whoever listens to this, it might save, you know, someone, or just help everyone that goes out there that maybe you don't believe, but you listen to this, and who knows, maybe it could help you sometime. I'm gonna do this first audio with one of my experiences, and slowly I'll share some more. One of my experiences I'd like to share, though, I had met a gentleman that had just bought a home and some land. He had called out for some law enforcement help, and the officer that had went to the call had come back, and he was making fun of this man because he said, yeah, he called me out there because he said there was a Bigfoot on his property, and it was looking in windows around his home at his young children. And they brushed it off, laughed about it, and then I decided to go out and speak with this gentleman. I'm just going to call him T. And when I went out and spoke with him, he said that when he first bought the property, he had moved everything in, loved it, and one night he heard screams and roars, and sounded like someone was taking down the whole forest up in the hills behind his home. He didn't know what it was, but he had never heard anything like it. The next day he had gone out and hiked up into the woods behind his home, and had found a lot of trees knocked over, and not just old rotted trees, not just small trees, and they were snapped, not cut. And he was able to show me photos, and took me to a few of the trees he had brought back with him to keep as evidence, and to show that it was not a chainsaw, and there was no way to have equipment of any sort go that far up into the hills to be able to snap a tree the size that he had shown. And we went, and actually I was able to visibly see. A short time after that, he said that he heard stomping sometimes on his back porch. Never knew what it was. Figured maybe a bear or something had come by. But one evening his children were watching TV in the living room on the floor, and he was in the kitchen. He came out, and the window across the way, he said he saw what looked like a very, very large humanoid man figure, but very, very hairy, and not, he could clearly tell it was not a man. He said, and I've hunted and lived in the country my whole life. I know what a bear is. I know what they look like. He said this was not a bear. It was nothing. He said, I've never seen anything like it. It scared me. And he said he grabbed his children and made sure they didn't see through that window, and he took them upstairs, grabbed his shotgun, and went back downstairs. When he got back down, he said the creature was gone. He went outside, looked, didn't see anything, and it freaked him out really bad. There was a very strong odor around his home. He said it was pretty much skunk, rotted meat, garbage, overwhelmingly strong. And on his home by this window, he said it was very strong smelling of urine, and he believes this creature had urinated on the home, maybe marking territory. He wasn't sure, but he thought, okay, I don't know what I saw. He didn't tell his wife or his kids, and he was hoping maybe it was just my imagination. The next night, he went outside to water the dogs and to give dog food to all of them out there in their bowl. The dog food bag was gone. It wasn't in the trash can that he had it in, stored in, and he didn't know what happened to it. It was a big 50-pound bag of dog food that was pretty much brand new, he said and told me. Later he found the bag emptied but up in the woods behind his home. The tree line was very close to the back of his home. Yeah, it was only probably 15 yards or so where the tree line was from the back of his home. Thick woods. And so he found that really strange. And he didn't lose any dogs or anything, but he started to hear them at night growling and scared, and he wasn't sure what was going on. He went to check one evening because he heard one of the dogs growling and then scratching at the door. He opened the door. Dogs came in, and at the tree line behind his home, he saw this creature again. He said it was about 7.5 feet tall, and he said it must have weighed over 500 pounds. He said it was a dark black or brown. It was too dark to make out a lot of features, and he hollered thinking, okay, maybe this is a man, a wild man, I don't know. He says, but he said, get off my property, with some very vulgar language I won't repeat. And it just stared at him, and he hollered, and still it didn't move, and no reaction. And so he stepped out onto the porch more to go down. As he came more out the door, he said it screamed, and he said it shook me so bad to my core and scared me that I ran back in, locked all the doors, and grabbed the shotgun again and went back to the door. And he said it had gotten closer to the house. So he was afraid for his family. His wife, kids are home at this time. And he says, I worked up the courage. I opened my door and I fired 3 rounds of buckshot through my screen door at this creature. He said it roared out in anger and pain and quickly turned and ran back up into the woods. He was able to find a little bit of blood on the ground, and he could clearly see that he did hit it. It was injured, but he never did find any body or anything else besides a little bit of blood. After that, he called law enforcement out because he was afraid and he wanted to have a little bit of help, and he was scared to death to tell them what he saw, and I don't blame him. And sadly, a lot of people are afraid to call for help because people are going to say, yeah, you're crazy. There's no apes in North America. There's been evidence of ape species on almost every continent on our planet, but somehow North America has none or ever had any. I find that a little strange. Fossil evidence, forest, the woods where a lot of great ape species, humans live, it's not an area that fossils form easily. So, and then if you look back, that the only record of gorillas, for instance, is the only fossil record we have besides animals we've actually took the bodies of and have before that were 9 teeth. That was all the fossil evidence we've had for gorillas. And for a long time, they were considered a myth. People said, oh, there's no way those animals are real. I believe it was in the early 1900s when someone finally shot and killed one and they were believed and finally proven real. Sorry, I digressed there a little bit. But I went out and spoke with him, and he said it kept coming by, and he said that it had, before, when he shot it, he believes he hit it mid-chest. And he believes maybe a little bit of buckshot went lower, legs maybe. Anyone that's fired a gun or knows anything about buckshot, birdshot, the further the target, the more the spray is going to be. He said, but it seemed, when he had seen it before and it ran off after he shot it, it was limping already. He said it was not, it didn't look like it was comfortable when it ran, that it was trying to substitute for a wound. And he didn't know what to do. This man had just bought this home for his family and was so excited, new job, and he was scared to death, wouldn't let his kids go out to play, and he didn't know what to do. So I came out and talked with him, and I didn't want this man to lose his home, and my job is to help keep people safe. So on my own private time, I went out and stayed with him a few times in the late evening, and for a while we heard noises, but anytime we went out we didn't see anything. But there was clearly a bad odor around the home. The dogs would go quiet or they'd whimper, but none ever turned up dead. But if you put dog food out at night, the bowls would be emptied and took off into the woods. This is just my theory. I think maybe this was an older male from when I finally laid eyes on it myself about a week later. It did appear to be injured and not able to, possibly it wasn't able to hunt. I believe that they are omnivores. Meat is a part of their diet, and maybe possibly this older male was pushed out of a family group by a younger male, and the first noises he heard of, where he said that it sounded like somebody was taking down the forest, and the roars and screams were maybe two males going at it, and this male lost the war, if you will. And being wounded, it was not able to effectively or efficiently hunt, and the dog food was a form of food, and partially starving, I would imagine. But the kids might have also looked like easy prey. Dogs would be a little more agile, too fast for it to properly hunt when they roamed free. But anyone that has kids knows kids, and his children are between 2 and 8. They're not that fast and not always that agile. And I have no evidence or excuse me, any proof that it was looking at these children as a possible food source, but it's not out of the realm of possibility to me. So it kept coming by. We worked out putting his dog food up, only fed him during the day. That seemed to only keep, it seemed to push it, kept coming closer to the house, which to me meant it was more of a possibility. The dog food's gone, that it was starting to look for another food source, and it's these smaller children were something it could set, maybe it believed it could take easily. I helped him clean out some of the wood line behind his home. We actually cut a lot of trees down and put about a nice 75 yards from the back of his home. We cleared that, and that's where the tree line was there. I helped him wire up some motion lights around the home and out on some of the trees there, and that seemed to work a little. He said that he didn't have any sightings real close to the home, but the lights would come on, and it seemed to be, it worked. Well, then one night he had called me in a panic, and he said he was woken by rocks being thrown, and that he heard shattering, that the lights we had put up around the home and on trees out against his wood line, that we had made the new wood line there for the trees, that they were broke, shattered by, and he was panicked. I went out there as quickly as I could. When I got there, he was worked up, armed. He had his kids upstairs with his wife, huddled, and they were scared because there was roars, there was glass they could hear shattered against the house, rocks hitting the home. So my conclusion was that they're very intelligent, very, very intelligent. The lights were hampered to it being able to stalk or move efficiently, at night, being nocturnal. And so with the big motion lights, the spotlights pretty much is what we had set up, it wasn't able to get closer to the home, being that it was wounded and slow. It needed, any predator or any hunter would know that if you're not going to be able to move fast quickly, you need to have an element of surprise and to move stealthy to get as close as possible to your prey. So breaking the lights with the rocks was a way to be able to have the darkness back, to be able to get closer again. We went ahead, and next day I helped him put up new lights, and we boxed him in a little bit. I got some thick plexiglass, and we kind of housed the lights in those. And we also, he said that he found marks, and again, next to, almost look like muddy prints on a window by the living room. And again, it was wet, real strong scent of urine there. And so what we did was rigged up, if you will, 2 big pepper spray, bear spray, basically a souped up form of pepper spray, and we set it up to where this motion sensor that works for lights, and that we had used, took a few of the ones from the broken ones, used these motion sensors and set it up on this particular window to where when that motion sensor went off, about 7.5 feet off the ground, the bear mace would spray, and see if that would work, so that if this creature came again to the window and the motion sensor went off, the bear spray should really soak its face, pretty much, you know, really hit it hard with that bear mace. Sure enough, a couple nights later, he was doing dishes, kids were asleep, and he hears this scream of pain and then a pounding on the side of his house. He said it felt like an earthquake. He grabbed a light and gun, looked, and he saw this creature wiping its face and hitting the house, and it took off for the trees. That seemed to really work, so we kept that going for him. He had to replace the cans actually a few times because it started to try to knock it down with, he said there was small rock sticks thrown that way. I don't want to go through every detail, don't want to bore people. But we did that in a few other spots, and also hooked up some loudspeakers with motion detectors so the lights would come on. It gets too close, we had the bear mace, and then these motion sensors hooked to these speakers. It blared a loud high frequency, and it would hurt the ears of the dogs. Yeah, I mean, so it was quite loud. But a combination of these three things that we had done, also clearing the woods further back, giving the area around his home, keeping it clear, low grass where there's nothing to hide behind or work close to the home without being seen quickly, it eventually went away. It quit coming by his home. He didn't smell anything anymore. The dogs didn't panic. The dog food at night was still there in the morning. It was a good lesson for me personally to find a way to drive these animals back in a way. It's a part of nature. They live in the nature. They're part of the wildlife. It's never good to have to kill wildlife if we don't have to. And I can't speak to whether this particular creature died off somewhere because it was too hard and found that there was no any way it could get an easy meal there. After the dog food was gone, the lights, the noise, and the bear mace, it seemed to drive it off. And since then, he's left all of it set up, checks it frequently, but hasn't had any issues at all since then. Which he shared with a few people, and I've tried as well, and we're just called crazy. Sadly, it's something that anybody that has had any weird experience or has had a sighting or an experience with these creatures, you're almost always labeled insane or crazy, or, oh, you misidentified something. Well, there's always a possibility of misidentification, and yes, when we are afraid, our minds are going to try to put things there in the dark that aren't there. Yeah, that does happen. But bears can't run on two legs. They don't snap trees. And there's no bear in the world that can throw rocks, or is able to have the intelligence to know I can throw this rock and break that light. It's kind of food for thought. Leave me a like and a message, and if you guys would like me to share more, let me know.